Max Verstappen is once again dominating the headlines, but this time, it's not due to his exceptional driving skills or his unyielding pursuit of victory. No, this time, he's caught up in a storm of controversy that goes beyond racing tactics or pit stop strategies. The debate isn't about speed or podium finishes, it's about his right to express himself. After receiving a controversial penalty from the FIA for using inappropriate language, Verstappen has taken a bold stance against the sport's governing body, igniting a fierce debate in the world of motorsport. So why is this story such a big deal? Here's the hook: this isn't just about one driver's frustration. It's about the fine line between enforcing rules and stifling the very passion that makes racing so thrilling. Imagine being a world champion, a master of speed and precision, only to be penalized for speaking your mind. The stakes are high, and this conflict between Verstappen and the FIA raises a question that every racing fan is now asking: is the FIA overstepping its bounds, or is it simply upholding the standards of sportsmanship? But that's not all. This confrontation has repercussions that could ripple through the entire sport. Verstappen, known for his fierce independence and unfiltered honesty, isn't just going to sit back and accept what he sees as an unjust ruling. His defiance is stirring up emotions and prompting other drivers and teams to question the rigidity of the sport's governing rules. This story is about more than a simple penalty. It's about the clash between a driver's raw authenticity and an organization's quest for order and decorum. So, stick around, because what you're about to hear goes far beyond the typical race day drama. It's a story that taps into the heart of Formula One, exploring themes of control, freedom, and the essence of competition itself. By the end of this video, you'll have a front row seat to a conflict that might just change the sport as we know it. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds, as Verstappen's fight against the FIA could set the stage for the future of racing. Now let's get into the full story, starting with how Max's silent protest during the Singapore Grand Prix set the tone for what would become one of the most heated debates in recent Formula One history. The controversy took a sharp turn during the Singapore Grand Prix weekend. Max Verstappen, known for his candidness and fiery passion, made a move that left everyone in the press room stunned. When it was time for the mandatory press conference, Verstappen responded to questions with unusually brief and almost dismissive answers. This wasn't just Max being difficult, it was a silent protest against the recent penalty imposed by the FIA. In his eyes, this punishment wasn't just unfair, it was an attack on the freedom that drivers like him cherish. But let's backtrack a bit to understand the full picture. The FIA had recently issued Verstappen a mandatory community service order, stating that his use of inappropriate language during a previous driver's press conference had crossed the line. For the FIA's president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, this was part of a broader effort to maintain a sense of decorum in the sport, aiming to limit drivers' use of foul language, especially in radio communications heard by fans worldwide. However, for Verstappen, this penalty felt more like an attempt to muzzle the raw, unfiltered emotions that make Formula One so exhilarating. To him, racing isn't just about speed, it's about passion, intensity, and yes, sometimes saying things in the heat of the moment that push boundaries. So when Max sat down for that press conference in Singapore, his silence spoke volumes. By giving curt, emotionless answers, he was sending a message: you want me to hold back my true self? Fine, this is what it looks like. It was a brilliant, albeit risky, move that left everyone in the room and watching at home wondering what his next steps would be. Later, when reporters pressed him on his thoughts about the penalty, he didn't mince words. "I find it, of course, ridiculous what happens," he stated with clear frustration. "Why should I then give full answers? Because it's very easy, apparently. You get a fine or some sort of penalty just like that." In that moment, it was evident that Verstappen wasn't just speaking for himself. He was voicing the concerns of many drivers who feel that the sport's governing body is too focused on controlling every aspect of their behavior. For him, this wasn't simply about avoiding a fine, it was about standing up for the spirit of the sport. He added, his voice laced with irony, "I prefer not to speak a lot, save my voice. We can do these interviews somewhere else if that's how it's going to be." His words captured a larger frustration, the sense that the sport was losing touch with the raw authenticity that made it captivating in the first place. The situation took on another layer when Verstappen suggested that the FIA was using him to set an example, to show other drivers what would happen if they crossed the line. They want to set a precedent. He continued, "People got warnings or a small fine before. Now, with me, they wanted to set an even bigger example, which for me is a bit weird. Verstappen explained that his earlier comment wasn't directed at anyone specifically, it was just an outburst about his car. Though he acknowledged that his words may have technically violated the FIA's code, he still felt that the penalty was excessive. "I don't want to blame the stewards," he clarified, his tone softening slightly. "I actually had a really good chat with them. They just have to follow the code, and the bookmacks recognized that the stewards were simply doing their jobs, bound by the regulations in place." But that didn't make it right in his eyes. It was a moment that revealed the complex dynamics at play: a passionate driver feeling constrained by a system that values order over the emotional highs and lows that make racing thrilling. This is where things get even more interesting. Verstappen's silent protest wasn't just about a single penalty, it was about a broader clash of ideals. By choosing to keep his responses minimal, he was highlighting a growing tension between the drivers and the sport's governing body, a struggle between the desire to be genuine and the pressure to conform. And in doing so, he set the stage for a larger debate about what Formula One should truly represent. Following Max Verstappen's controversial press conference at the Singapore Grand Prix, things quickly escalated behind the scenes. Red Bull's sporting director, Jonathan Wheatley, was spotted in a tense discussion with FIA steward Tim Mayer. While the contents of their conversation remained confidential, it was evident that Verstappen's silent protest had struck a chord. Mayer wasn't just speaking to Wheatley, though he was seen conversing with other FIA officials, indicating that Verstappen's defiant stance was already creating ripples of concern within the highest echelons of motorsport governance. Shortly afterward, the FIA felt the need to address the situation publicly. A spokesperson confirmed to gpblog.com that Verstappen would not face any further sanctions for his brief responses during the press conference. According to the regulations, drivers must not undermine the sport's reputation and are required to be present for press conferences to answer questions from the media. Since Verstappen, albeit with minimal replies, had participated in the media interactions, he was considered to be in compliance. In a brief statement, the FIA clarified he took part in the FIA press conference as required by the procedures, putting an end to the immediate controversy, but leaving the underlying tensions unresolved. This incident, however, had far-reaching implications. Verstappen's behavior and the subsequent response from the FIA triggered a domino effect, influencing how other racers viewed the governing body's grip on their actions. Verstappen's silent protest had not only sparked debates but also resonated with fellow competitors who had their own grievances with the FIA's strict enforcement of rules. One of the most vocal was 8-time World Rally champion Sebastian Ogier. Just a few weeks later, during the Rally Chile, Ogier adopted a similar approach in his interviews, giving short, almost clipped answers, echoing Verstappen's quiet defiance. Ogier's actions weren't random. They were directly tied to a suspended fine he received for comments about officials at the Acropolis rally earlier in September. In a candid moment, he expressed his frustrations, stating, "Drivers have been instructed by FIA leadership to shut their mouths." His protest was not personal, but rather a reflection of a wider frustration among drivers who felt their voices were being stifled. He apologized to fans, explaining, "You realize that I didn't really want to talk today. We've been told that we shouldn't." It was a moment that exposed the growing disconnect between drivers and the governing body. The FIA had been on a mission to tighten its grip on driver conduct, not just in Formula One but across all motorsport disciplines. President Mohammed bin Sulayem had made it clear that controlling the language drivers used during both races and media interactions was a priority. To the FIA, it was about maintaining professionalism and setting a standard for what's acceptable behavior in the public eye. But to the drivers, it felt like an attempt to suppress their raw, emotional reactions, the very essence of what makes motorsport so compelling. Verstappen's protest wasn't merely about this specific incident. It highlighted the broader issue of how the FIA handles drivers' expressions of frustration or emotion. For Max, this was about more than a penalty. It was about the fundamental nature of the sport and the freedom of competitors to be themselves, even when that meant speaking out in moments of intense emotion. And now, with other drivers like Ogier joining the chorus, it was clear that Verstappen's defiance was inspiring a quiet yet powerful movement against what many saw as overreach by the sport's regulators. The tension between the FIA and the drivers was now out in the open, and it wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. Verstappen's decision to stand his ground had opened up a broader conversation about where the line should be drawn between maintaining order and preserving the spirit of competition. It was becoming evident that this incident could mark a turning point in the ongoing power struggle between drivers and the governing body. The question that loomed large was how far would the FIA go to assert its authority, and how far were drivers like Verstappen willing to push back? As the controversy with the FIA unfolded, it became clear that this was more than just a passing squabble. Verstappen's defiance had unearthed a deeper conversation about the direction of Formula One and the role of its governing body. The tension wasn't just between one driver and the FIA, it was symbolic of a larger struggle within the sport, pitting the driver's passion and authenticity against increasingly stringent regulations. And for Verstappen, the stakes were personal. This incident had sparked questions about his future in Formula One, with hints that he might be reconsidering his long-term commitment to the sport. In a candid moment, Verstappen expressed his frustrations and hinted at the toll these penalties were taking on his enthusiasm for racing. "For sure, these kinds of things definitely decide my future as well," he said. When you can't be yourself, or you have to deal with these kinds of silly things, it's tiring to him. Racing was supposed to be about the thrill, the fierce competition, and pushing limits, not about constantly watching every word. The frustration was palpable in his voice as he explained that while winning championships and races was incredible, he also wanted to enjoy his time in the sport. "Everyone in this paddock is pushing to the limit, even those at the back of the grid. But if you have to deal with all these kinds of silly things, for me, that is not a way of continuing in the sport, that's for sure." As Formula One evolves, so does its drama, both on and off the track. Max Verstappen's stand against the FIA is more than just a dispute over words, it's a clash of ideals that will likely shape the future of the sport. So, what do you think? Is Verstappen right to push back, or is the FIA simply doing what it must to keep the sport in line? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this unfolding story.